I will begin with a prepared statement. My name is Damon Thomas, and I write about the weirdness of growing up in a very rural Dixie County, Florida. A kid burned down the scout hut there, that old log cabin in the Cross City Park. When asked why, he just said he was bored. All I knew could relate. Small town boredom, rural gloom. My great-grandfather Damon Thomas is buried beside his wife Lula now. Mount Horeb Cemetery near Bell, Florida. As a kid, I fell into a fire ant mound. Delmer rescued me. I cried, covered in bites. He just laughed. It's only that is how you learn. This is what I learned. Southern is a design element these days. A large craft market exists for this decorative southernness. Framed art, throw pillows saying, I love you, like biscuits and gravy, and bless your heart. But I've yet to see a, you don't look like you're from around here, dish towel. This was a phrase I heard most growing up in small town Florida. It didn't take much to hear these words back then. And I wasn't even Marie Osmond's little bit country in a town where the only barber offered 3 haircut options. They had defined how locals should look, how locals should talk and act. It took very little difference to get you noticed. But these rigid rules were free. You tossed on a metaphorical, don't hassle me, I'm local shirt and did as you pleased. Then headed to Gainesville to get looks not offered at the local Western wear store. Buying Jerome Russell punky color involved driving an hour one way, so there were no rash decisions here. Blue hair required planning, purpose, and effort. Piercing studios rarely checked ID then. All my friends were covered in tiny scars. A 16-year-old could get her nipples pierced. Even as teens, we were surprised this was possible. When a friend had this done, the piercer mistook me for a squeamish boyfriend and left the studio door open. Many things surprised us then. We headed back home to, you don't look like you're from around here. Strangers at Piggly Wiggly and cashiers at the junior food store letting you know that you didn't belong. This did not surprise us. All my friends are covered in tiny scars. Farm work doesn't pay very well. You work someone's inherited land and bring home a few dollars. I worked in those fields when young, wading through sugar sand to sucker tobacco while still in elementary school. The sticky sap from the plants made your head spin. There was no way to know if the nausea was from nicotine or from the heat. It didn't matter much at the time. Sick is sick. You just scrubbed your hands with sand and moved on to the next plant, snapping off the flower tops, removing the only splash of color in those fields. Your job changed with the growing season, that wheel of the year turned by markets, plant, tend, pick. The tractor hauling the planter drove too fast for my young hands to keep up. Fast twitch reflexes that finished rented Nintendo games in a weekend struggled to get sweet potatoes into the ground. The hoe you used on the weeds crowding watermelon vines also fended off snakes. All those cantaloupes loaded onto a trailer, their musky scent mixed with body odor. Bites of fleshy fruit flavored with sweat. Young kids dragged watermelons from fields. Only the big melons went to markets. The rest were culls. You watched them get pitched up in a slow-moving truck. Saw faces wince after stepping with a sore ankle. Heard cries as backs gave out. I walked off those fields then. Angry demands got one reply. I'm no farmer. I went hunting as a kid. A rural rite of passage. Head out early in the morning looking for that first kill. Return a man. These are the things I heard, at least. I wasn't very interested. After my baby chicks died, I didn't completely trust those 4-H gun safety tips. Most kids went hunting, boys and girls posing with their first deer, at times with streaks of blood smeared under their eyes, all due Shin's smile and roar. I inherited a 16-gauge shotgun. At 10, it was a heavy hunk of metal and wood. With a loud boom, I exploded milk jugs in my grandpa's field. My dad woke me before dawn that morning. It was my first hunt. I drowsily ate a bowl of Lucky Charms before we headed out to the hunting woods. State road to county road, then the road became a trail. In the dark morning, we saw a truck ahead of us hit a raccoon. We stopped as they drove on deeper into the woods. Using a camp shovel, I placed the dead raccoon in the back of our truck. This was the only animal we saw that morning. My grandpa had a trapper's license and later sold that raccoon. He laughed loudly as he handed me the $12. My first kill. I never went hunting again. Why bother? I was already a man. Once, I went to buy a turtle at the Chiefland flea market. They said turtles were only legal to buy for educational purposes. Before I could buy, I was asked to write "for education" on a piece of paper. With the official paperwork completed, we headed behind the booth to get the turtle. There was a capybara snoozing in a kid's wading pool. The capybara was not for sale. I spent a lot of time on the banks of the Swanee growing up. Cookouts and swimming at Purvis Landing. There was a rope swing on an old cypress tree. Swing out into the dark brown water. The bank was lined with cypress knees. You learned to let go. We went fishing up near Log Landing Road, a remote area, more snakes than people. One Saturday we were joined by a boat, a new doctor in town. He raced up and down a short stretch of river, blaring, ZZ-Top legs. The boat's wake crashed against the shore, scared all the fish away, changed our dinner plans, and ended with a crash. His boat raced into a log floating slowly downstream. He screamed for help over AC/DC, rock and roll, and noise pollution. Not help for himself, help for his boat. It sank into the Swanee, and the fishing improved. In 1976, they found skeletal remains chained to a tree in a Dixie County swamp, a Bible beside the body. He died slowly. There was time to build a shelter. He tightened his belt as he wasted away. I grew up hearing this was done by a specific church, where if God had wanted him set free, his chains would be cast off. So how could it count as murder? I will not be writing about this. That is how you get yourself chained to a tree. A person can have strong flea market opinions. Waldo with a big horse, Fanning Springs for plants and rusty tools. Chiefland was the best near home, but on special occasions we went to the big flea market. Howard's Flea Market was an hour down US 19 in Homosassa, Florida. Chiefland had a book table. Howard's had multiple book booths. It was a destination. Chores only provided so much money for books. I read more than I worked. There are no regrets, but it did mean I needed to be selective. I'd spend an hour more deciding. On one trip, this decision was waiting for Godot. The distracted booth owner said it was $1. Big flea market prices. I paid and went to find my family. Started reading on the long trip home. They waited, became frustrated, then waited some more. Outside Chiefland, the sky became gray-green. Damp air smelled of dirt. A downpour flooded the road. We parked at Ralph's Burger House. Snowbirds found the name hilarious, but we had different names for vomit. I finished Godot as we waited and looked up to see US 19 still covered in water. We were all waiting on something. The Blackjack Oak is a hard tree. I chopped ours down. Sitting to the side of our wooded acre, standing 20 feet tall. The axe was old, older than I was at the time. The weathered handle hurt the hands. A rusty head, barely cut. Chipped away at the tree, over hours, over days, and the tree fell. A creak, a crack, a soft thud on sandy ground. My blistered hands dropped the axe. Tired legs limped away. Summers were long then, and trees fell. Elton John sang Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. My Uncle Lewis agreed. Weekends were spent in the types of bars found near the county line. Ample parking and no neighbors to disturb. There was a North Florida wildness in my uncle. All the swagger of Skinner's whiskey rock and roller without the ain't no good life introspection. Because the more I fight with sadness, yeah, it only seems the more that I grieve. Bar fights were common then. Fights were common everywhere in rural Florida then. And my high school fights were a near daily occurrence. A friend describes it all now as, you actually hit people? Yes, I did. It was a solid and simple process. The best man won. My Uncle Lewis was the best man. He trained like a prize fighter to hit out weekends. There was always some reason to fight. Hank Williams Jr. called it an attitude adjustment. One Saturday night, Lewis headed outside to fight. He was stronger and faster. Things ended quickly. They headed back inside together where my uncle bought the guy a drink. Moments later, a mason jar of beer crashed into Lewis's face. He left the bar and came to our house late. I entered the living room to hear my dad say, "Lewis, you ain't got no nose." My uncle only replied, "It isn't supposed to go this way." Blood still covered the porch in the morning. My dog Spotty had left a trail of bloody paw prints off into the yard. Lewis never returned to those bars. He spent his time at home with a newfound interest in religion. As I last saw him, he asked my favorite Bible story. It was Zacchaeus climbing up that sycamore tree. Lewis was dead a few days later. A shotgun blast to the face ended his life. The body was removed, but his bedroom was covered in congealed blood. A family friend offered to help clean. After he buried all he collected in the backyard, he wanted to say a few words, but could only say, "It isn't supposed to go this way." My baby cousin was killed by a drunk driver on a remote Tennessee road. Blinded by whiskey, that driver flew through a stop and knocked my uncle's car down an embankment. There were no cell phones then. You'd only scream for help. Your leg shattered, your baby dead. Screams echoed through the hills. Help arrived an hour later. There was a lawsuit. Lawyers promised you'll never have to work again. They got just enough to pay hospital bills and bury their child. Just enough for an infant-sized coffin and a metal burial vault. I was a pallbearer at 12. They wanted the young cousins to carry her to the grave. Our crowd gathered at the churchyard, and we grasped the handles of her burial vault. It was heavy, too heavy for us kids. We slowly walked towards her grave, struggling step by step as all around cried. When the vault reached graveside, we returned to our seats. My thumb was badly sprained, my ankle twisted. Both were black and blue in the morning. Both were sore for weeks. All around us cried for weeks. It was heavy, too heavy for us kids. In small towns, most everyone is your neighbor. 3 miles down the road still feels close. The whole place is mostly space. A friend grew up on the other end of Chavis Road. We shared a bus to Old Town Elementary. She missed a lot of school, cystic fibrosis. We grew up and headed off to high school. She was boy crazy. There was a lot of talk of dates. The PG-13 details echoed in our school bus. Some were skeptics, but with snowbirds having their grandkids visit, anything was possible. Who knew the ways of Michiganders? In 11th grade, I was invited to her birthday party. I was the only person to show up. She was pale and tired in a bed in her living room. I told her she needed to bounce back or disappoint all her guys. She shook her head. There were no guys. Said she'd never been kissed. I kissed her. She laughed. Said she had been kissed, but wanted to kiss me too. Then begged me not to tell her Pentecostal minister dad. And I never did tell. She wanted her secrets. Charity Mae Connell died in 1997 at the age of 21. Her father Noah passed away a few years later. There are no secrets to keep now, only stories to tell. Thank you.